Some invitations arrive like thunder. This one arrived like a held breath. "Come tonight," the message read. "No explanations. Just trust me." Leon always knew how to stitch one into words, how to tilt a sentence so it caught the light of curiosity and reflected it back as need. He was a friend, once, then a distant star, then a name that could still summon weather in a quiet room. The building had a private elevator whose polished steel turned faces into ripples. Maya stared at her reflection until it divided into versions of herself. The pragmatic consultant, the exhausted daughter, the woman who always left first, before the music shifted, before the question arrived. The elevator sighed open, a hallway unfurled, long and quiet, like a question no one had the courage to answer. Leon's penthouse was all glass and restraint. City lights stitched the horizon into a trembling seam. Music poured like warm rain from a hidden speaker, piano, low and tender. Leon met her at the door in an open charcoal jacket, sleeves rolled, no tie. He smiled in that specific, unguarded way that made people confess things they'd never admitted aloud. "You came," he said, as if the night had been holding itself together by the thinnest thread, and she was the knot. "Is this a celebration?" Maya asked, moving through the room like a diver in new water. "Or a test?" Leon laughed soft. "Neither. Both." He handed her a glass. The ice chimed like distant bells. "I want you to meet my friends. They were not strangers. Not entirely." Elio leaned against the kitchen island, all shoulders and steady eyes, the sort of man who could quiet a room without speaking. He carried an ease that was not laziness, but anchored patience, like a harbor that had weathered storms and learned their language. Across from him, Naveen sat on the window ledge, half silhouette, a little amused, a little elsewhere. Something about him was unfinished and luminous, like a sketch left on purpose. Maya shook their hands and felt the night click forward one notch. Leon poured, narrated, orchestrated. Elio asked what brought her joy lately. The question landed like a key in an old lock. "Cooking," she said. "I've been learning how to ruin recipes until they teach me something." Naveen smiled. "That's how I write." He gestured to a notebook by the glass. "You ruin drafts until they give up their secrets." They talked about the precise moment a city feels like a story and not a place. About the sound a train makes when it's carrying more grief than it can hold. Time forgets itself around certain people. The room warmed with a kind of care that wasn't loud. Maya let her shoulders release the day. When the game began, it did not announce itself. Leon tipped his glass and said, "Honesty or dare, but our version." Naveen raised a brow. Elio folded his arms, amused. "No lies," Leon said, "but also no harm." He looked at Maya last, as if asking permission to change the temperature of the air. "Honesty," Elio said first, "always the bridge." "What are you most afraid of wanting?" Maya felt the question unfurl inside her like a slow, careful flame. She could taste old answers: success, stability, the relief of approval. But none of those were the true shape of her fear. The piano changed keys. Somewhere, a siren stitched itself into the night and passed. She said, "I'm afraid of wanting a life that doesn't look respectable, but feels like mine." The room didn't applaud. It did something better. It softened. "Navin's turn. Dare," he said, eyes bright. Leon considered him with affection edged in challenge. "Read the last page you wrote, unedited." Navin breathed out a laugh that trembled, then read a paragraph that tasted like an apology and a promise at once. When he finished, the silence felt full, like a held hand. Leon turned to Maya. "Your choice." She held the glass, watched the ice surrender itself to warmth. "Honesty," she said. "If I walk to the window and ask the city a question, will it answer?" "That depends," Leon said gently, "on whether you mean it." So she walked to the glass, pressed her palm to the cool, and let a private, secret question move through her like current. What would it cost to stop pretending that longing is a thing to be managed instead of met? The city's answer was neither word nor omen. It was a sensation, the unmistakable feeling of being seen by something too vast to lie to. When she turned, the room had shifted, not in furniture or light, but in attention. This, then, was the true dare, to remain when the conversation stopped being clever and began being true. Leon set his glass down. "Let's try something," he said. "A memory exchange. One story that changed you, then one thing you'd do again if you weren't afraid." Elio spoke about the night. The ocean almost took him, and how every day since had been a different kind of tide. Navin spoke about the novel he abandoned at page 200 because he loved it too much to break it, and how starting again felt like morning and a miracle. Maya spoke about a diagnosis her mother received in winter, and the way hospitals have their own weather. As she spoke, words she hadn't planned to share rose like small birds and found air. When she finished, no one hurried to fill the space. Elio's eyes held steady witness. Navin's fingers traced the rim of his glass, thoughtful. Leon stepped close enough that she could smell cedar and something like rain. "If you weren't afraid," he asked softly, "what would you reach for tonight?" Maya looked from one to the other, feeling the gravity shift. Desire, yes, but braided with tenderness, curiosity, relief, the possibility of a night that was not conquest but consent, not spectacle but sanctuary. "I'd ask not to be the only one brave," she said. Leon's smile was almost a vow. "Then we meet you." They dimmed the lights. They put away the rules. They let a different kind of honesty begin, one made of closeness and patient attention, of hands that asked and pauses that listened, of nearness that honored the word enough. The glass reflected only silhouettes, a quartet of human weather, learning how to stay. Morning draws a cruel line between what was felt and what can be named. Dawn found the room quieter than truth. Coffee steamed on the counter as if nothing sacred had been attempted, but the body remembers what language cannot carry without breaking. Maya stood at the window with a mug, and the city's spine unrolling beneath her. She had slept on Leon's sofa, or perhaps sleep had visited her in pieces and left before introductions. Leo moved through the kitchen like a ritual, sleeves pushed up, wrist scar faint in the gray light. He handed her a plate, sliced citrus, toast, something soft and savory. "Eat," he said, voice gentle enough to be a spell. She ate and felt gratitude uncurl where fear might have nested. Naveen was at the dining table, hair a mess of stubborn waves, notebook already open. "I write after rare weather," he said without looking up, "before my inner critic remembers my name." Leon appeared with a second mug for Maya, then stopped, checking her eyes with the care reserved for fragile glass. "You okay?" he asked. She tested the room for regret and found none, only a bright, aching clarity. "I am," she said, "but I don't know what to call any of this." "Maybe we don't," Leon said. "Maybe we practice without naming, for now." He glanced at the others. They nodded without theater. Agreement can be a kind of shelter. They cleaned the room as if blessing it. Pillows back, glasses washed, music off. The city resumed its regular heartbeat, but beneath the common gestures lay a new geography. Trust lines drawn in invisible ink that only reveal under heat. The day kept them together by accident. A burst pipe somewhere below turned the elevators off for hours. The building management sent a weary text apologizing for the inconvenience. Trapped became held. Held became invited. By noon, the apartment had transformed from stage to workshop. Leo repaired a loose cabinet hinge, humming. Naveen read a chapter aloud to no one in particular, and then crossed out 3 pages. Leon made a late lunch and told a story about getting lost in a foreign train station and finding his way by following the smell of oranges. Maya found herself laughing more than she had in months. But beneath that buoyancy, another current moved. It sounded like, "What now?" She found Leo on the balcony, tightening a wind-sculpted chair leg. "You seemed certain last night," she said, bluntness softened by the wind. "How?" Leo wiped his hands, considered. "Certainty is a rumor. I only know how to listen to what quiets me." "You did." He shrugged, not dismissive, just honest. "Also, I don't want a life that requires pretending my tenderness is a liability." She carried that sentence like a warm stone. Inside, Naveen had built a small cathedral of marginalia on the table. He looked up as she approached. "Do you ever worry," she asked, "that we are auditioning for a version of ourselves we can't maintain?" "All the time," he said. "That's why I prefer drafts to identities." He gestured at his pages. "A draft is a living thing. It permits revision." Leon, drying dishes, called over. "What do we revise then?" Maya took a breath. "The rule that says we must choose a single story when our hearts contain several." The sentence shocked her with its own alignment. Leon set down the towel slowly, as if the air had changed its density. Later, the elevator resumed its obedience. The building exhaled. Departure pressed its cold mouth to to the back of their necks. Goodbyes at thresholds are their own genre, too short for ceremony, too long for pretense. Elio hugged her with both arms, a harbor again. Naveen squeezed her shoulder as if to say, "Keep the draft alive." Leon lingered. "Tonight?" he asked, a question dressed as a suggestion. "Not yet," Maya said. "If I see you too soon, I'll forget how to find myself." It was not a rejection, but a boundary that felt like an offering. "I'll return if I can return as myself." Leon's expression held both understanding and a small, reluctant ache. "Okay," he said. "We'll be here." Days fray differently when a secret lives inside them. Work felt at once trivial and urgent. Maya sent emails that sounded composed and thought about hands that had learned her carefully. She cooked a stew that tasted like patience and watched steam write prayers on the kitchen window. She called her mother and listened to the slow, ordinary drama of lab results and afternoon television. She walked past couples and tried not to assign them stories. At night, dreams rearranged furniture. In one, she stood in a field of radio towers, and each lit up when she spoke the truth. In another, she climbed a staircase that kept curving back to the same landing, until she set down the suitcase she didn't realize she carried. She woke with the understanding that some doors only open when both hands are free. She texted Leon, "Dinner, my place, Friday." The dots appeared like a heartbeat. "Us," he sent back. She typed, erased, typed. "Yes," she wrote, "all of you." Then she turned her phone face down and let the future knock until it bruised. Friday came storm bright. The apartment smelled like garlic and citrus and a little fear. She set the table with mismatched plates, inherited from a life she had shed piece by piece. When the knock came, her hands surprised her by not shaking. She opened the door to find 3 faces she had memorized in a night and carried all week. Dinner was loud with relief. Stories layered, interrupted, braided. Elio insisted on doing dishes. Naveen insisted on drying. Leon insisted on music. After, they sat on the floor among pillows. Maya drew a circle on the rug with her finger. "Rules," she said, "because the body relaxes when it knows the edges of a room. We name what we want. We ask before we touch. We stop if anyone says stop. We leave space for later." "Yes," Elio said, like a vow. "Yes," Naveen echoed, quiet but steady. Leon looked at Maya with bright, grateful eyes. "You lead," he said. They did not reach for spectacle. They reached for presence, for hands that announced themselves, for attention that felt like shelter, for breath that stayed. The night grew deep and slow, more like tide than storm. In the quiet after, they lay in the heavy sweetness that follows courage. A phone buzzed on the counter, indifferent to reverence. Maya ignored it. It buzzed again, more urgent now, like a door she had forgotten to lock. Finally, she stood, padded over, and looked. The name on the screen turned the air metallic. Ria, her ex. 2 missed calls. A message. "Emergency, please." Maya felt the pivot before she thought it. "I have to go," she said, grabbing her keys, apology rushing to her mouth like heat. Leon was on his feet instantly. "We're coming." She shook her head. "I don't know what this is." Elio already had his jacket. Then all the more reason. Naveen tucked his notebook into his pocket, as if words might be needed. On the street, the city had a different face, harder, brighter, less interested in tenderness. They moved fast, a small constellation, toward a night that would demand a new kind of bravery. Rhea lived in a building that wore its history like a bruise. 6th floor, end of the hall, a door whose paint couldn't commit to staying. Maya pressed the buzzer and felt the memory of old arguments rise like steam. When the door finally opened, Rhea stood there with eyes that had not slept and a mouth that had forgotten how to pretend. "Thank God," she said, and then her voice broke. Inside, the apartment looked like a search had taken place, drawers half open, a lamp at a wrong angle, a plant tipped on its side like a fallen intention. Rhea moved through the room like someone who had already apologized to the furniture. "It's my brother," she said, voice thin. "He's gone. He left a note. He turned off his phone." Maya's body entered the old choreography of crisis without consulting her mind. "When did you last hear from him?" "Yesterday." "He say anything unusual?" "He said he was tired." The word landed like a small, heavy stone. Elio took in the room with quick, comprehensive calm. "He have places he goes when he needs quiet." Rhea named a park, a bridge, a diner. Naveen sat at the coffee table, already opening his notebook. "What time was the last text?" 10:13. "What did it say?" "Don't wait up." Leon touched Maya's back, steady, brief, anchor-like. "We split up," he said, voice low. "Call if anything changes. No heroics." He looked at Rhea. "We find him." The certainty in his tone made space where panic had been choking the room. The night swallowed them. The park first, swings churring like old insects, a bench keeping a secret. Elio checked the edges, the places where loneliness sits. Nothing but the usual ghosts. The bridge, cold metal, river moving with patient indifference. Naveen walked and looked for the specific silence in which despair hides, eyes scanning for the shape of a person who thinks himself invisible. Nothing but wind rehearsing the same old arguments. Maya and Leon took the diner. It still smelled like butter and tired things. The waitress recognized Maya from years ago and set down 2 coffees before they ordered. "You're back late," she said, not unkind. Maya showed a photo on her phone. "Have you seen him?" The waitress frowned, then nodded. "He was here, sat in the corner. Left around 11:30. Paid in cash. Didn't finish his pie." She said it like an omen. Back on the street, the city had turned up the volume. Sirens stitched and unstitched the night. Maya felt the fault line inside her widen, the pull toward the men who had made room for her longing, and the old gravitational field of Rhea, the unfinished conversations, the shared language of crisis, the habit of rushing in. She hated that part of her, loved the competence of this moment. She hated that another part of her was grateful for the excuse to step away from tenderness before it could turn into a demand. Leon kept pace beside her, saying nothing that would collapse her into choosing. "What?" she asked finally. "You're quiet. I'm watching how you carry 10 things at once," he said, and resisting the urge to take one without asking. The gentleness in it scraped her raw. They met the others by the bridge, breath making brief ghosts. A Leo had called a friend in the patrol unit. A quiet alert went out. Naveen had searched social media for recent posts by Ria's brother and found a photograph from earlier that day. River, sky, a caption that read simply, "Edge." They fanned out along the railing, scanning, calling his name. Arjun, Maya's voice lifted and broke. Nearby, a figure shifted in shadow. A Leo moved first, slow, hands visible. "Hey, man," he said, as if greeting a neighbor watering his plants. "We've been trying to find you." Arjun turned. He was young in the way grief makes people young, cheeks unshaven, eyes rimmed red not from tears, but from holding them back too long. "I'm fine," he lied, the way people are taught to. Naveen stayed 3 paces back. "You left a note," he said. "Notes are loud." Arjun laughed once, brittle. "It's not a cry for help," he said. "It's a cry for silence." Leon leaned on the railing, looked out at the water, not at Arjun. "When I'm tired," he said, voice almost conversational, "the river looks like permission, but it's an unforgiving teacher." He let the sentence hang like a bridge lowered halfway. Maya stepped closer, palms open, nothing to fix in her hands. "I can't make promises on behalf of a future I don't control," she said. "But I can stand here with you until the cold is the only reason to move." Arjun's mouth trembled, the first true thing his body had done all night. It wasn't dramatic after that. It was a long, small negotiation with gravity and shame. It was a Leo offering his coat. It was Naveen saying, "We don't have to talk, we can just walk." It was Leon keeping the space honest. It was Arjun stepping back, not because someone convinced him of the worth of tomorrow, but because a few people consented to carry the weight of tonight with him. At Ria's, relief detonated into anger, because that is the body's favorite misdirection. "You should have called me earlier," Maya said. "I didn't want to need you," Ria snapped, and then collapsed into a chair like a building, inspected and found dangerous. Maya knelt and took her hands. "Needing someone is not a crime scene," she said, and felt the old love rise, feral and undressed. After the paperwork and the tea and the promises of therapy and sleep, the men waited at the door like weather that had done its job. Ria looked at them properly for the first time. "Thank you," she said, voice scraped. "I don't know who you are to her, but thank you. We're the ones who came when she asked," Leon said simply. On the sidewalk, the city had softened, or maybe only their edges had. "You should go home," Maya said, throat rough. "I need to stay a while." Leo nodded. Naveen hugged her like a sentence without a period. Leon met her eyes and found the place where gratitude and fear live together. "We'll be here," he said again, and somehow the repetition did not diminish the promise. It strengthened it. In Ria's living room, Maya watched dawn dilute the dark. She understood then that wanting was not the problem. The problem was believing that to choose one tenderness required murdering the others. She texted Leon at 6:11. "Still here. Thank you, 3 dots then. You don't owe us a performance of certainty. Rest. Names are the first rooms we build for our lives. They are also the first rooms we outgrow." Weeks stretched and folded. Crises cooled into routines. Arjun started therapy, and on stubborn days, showed up anyway. Ria slept, ate, returned to the slow maintenance of her own weather. Maya visited, but the old choreography had been retired. No more sprinting into the fire, because she mistook endurance for love. With Leon, Elio, and Navin, time became a practice instead of an event. They cooked together on Thursdays. They walked through the night market, where vendors shouted poetry disguised as produce prices. They found a booth that served soup like the memory of warmth. They learned the dimensions of each other's stillness. Desire was a guest who had been given a drawer and a quiet set of instructions. Knock, enter only when welcomed, help clean up. One evening, they returned to the penthouse where it had begun. The city wore a necklace of weather storms glinting on the horizon, lightning rehearsing a future performance. The room remembered them. The piano remembered them. Maya stood by the window and felt the early static of a necessary conversation. "I need to say some things," she began, no fanfare. Leon turned the music down. Elio sat, hands open on his knees. Navin closed his notebook, eyes steady. "I can't promise that I won't fear what we're building," she said. "I have been taught to love inside narrow corridors. But I also can't pretend that this isn't the most honest weather I've ever stood in." "Then we build wider corridors," Elio said, like a simple instruction to a carpenter. Maya smiled, brief and relieved. "I need language that doesn't collapse us into cliches," she continued. "Not a label that satisfies strangers. A name that fits like a good coat." Navin tilted his head. "We could call it a practice. Practices have room for failure and revision." Leon watched her carefully. "What do you need from each of us?" The question wasn't an exam. It was a gift of specificity. She moved slowly, as if arranging places at a table. To Elio, "I need your steadiness, but not your self-erasure. Promise to tell me when you're tired of being the harbor." Elio nodded, eyes warm. "I promise." To Navin, "I need your curiosity, but not at the cost of your pages. Don't turn us into prose when you need to live it." Navin's mouth quirked. "I'll try to leave some moments unannotated." To Leon, "I need your leadership without choreography. Ask, don't arrange." Leon's yes was a quiet thing, but it vibrated like a tuning fork. They named boundaries like doorways, visible, passable, protective. They agreed to a monthly inventory. What worked? What hurt? What could change? They wrote it down not as a contract, but as a map with soft edges. They laughed at themselves for being earnest. They stayed earnest anyway. Later, Stormlight folded the room into a private theater. The air smelled like electricity and wet stone. They lay together, not a tangle so much as an arrangement that honored knees and backs and the unbearable tenderness of spines. Kisses were slow letters. Hands were translators. Nothing was rushed toward crescendo. They practiced listening as a way of touching. The room filled with the quiet of people who had decided not to leave themselves behind in order to stay. In the hush afterward, the storm finally performed, the sky opening in a quick aria of rain that made the windows shiver. Maya felt sleep arriving and knew she could let it. Before it took her, she spoke into the half-dark. "I'm not choosing between you," she said. "I'm choosing with you." She felt the sentence land in 3 chests. She felt her own body accept the permission she'd been withholding. Morning came like a soft verdict. The city smelled rinsed. Maya woke to find a note on the counter in Leon's hand. Inventory, Sunday. Coffee, then honesty. Elio had drawn a small harbor in the corner. Naveen had added a line from a poem. "Let us be citizens of each other's small republics." She laughed, then cried in that clean way that sometimes follows laughter when the body realizes it survived something it had braced for. Sunday arrived. They sat with coffee and the list. What worked? Slowness. Consent as a habit, Thursdays. What hurt? The way Maya disappeared when fear got loud. The way Leon filled silence with plans. The way Elio took too much weight and called it sturdiness. The way Naveen tried to narrate himself safe. What could change? More check-ins, fewer assumptions. A shared calendar that wasn't a trap, but a kindness. They argued without weaponizing. They apologized without theater. They revised without shame. Practice, it turned out, meant exactly that. Weeks layered into a season. Ria came to dinner with Arjun, who wore a new, careful steadiness, like a borrowed jacket he was learning to make his own. They ate too much, told the kind of jokes only people who have stood at the edge can tell, and did not mention the river unless the river asked to be mentioned. After, Maya walked Ria to the bus stop. The city exhaled warm air through grates like the breath of a sleeping animal. "You look different," Ria said, studying her face as if a map had been redrawn. "Lighter or braver. Maybe I stopped measuring love by how much it hurts," Maya said. "Maybe I started measuring it by how much room it makes." Ria's smile held both pride and the particular ache of watching someone you love belong in a room you do not live in. "I'm glad," she said, truly. They hugged like people who have finally learned the grammar of letting go. Back at the penthouse, the sunset built a cathedral out of glass and fire. Maya stood with Leon, Elio, and Naveen, and they watched the city do the daily miracle of refusing to stop being beautiful just because humans were tired. "What are we?" Leon asked, not as a trap this time, but as an invitation. Maya looked at the 3 of them and saw not categories, but countries, places she could visit and be changed by, places she could help build, places that had already taught her a new language for tenderness. "We're a long conversation," she said. "We're a practice. We're a promise to keep the room big." The city answered with lights like yesies. Inside, they set the table. They set down their phones. They set aside perfection. Names could come later. For now, they had the work and the wonder. For now, they had a living thing. For now, they had the courage to stay. For now, they had the courage to stay.